Welcome to another episode of the Vinyl and Celluloid podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Derek, also known as Horror Junkie 103178, as we talk about our favorite overlooked horror gems of the 1970s. Stay tuned. So, Derek, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest here today. To all the audience members, this is we're talking with Derek here today, aka Horror Junkie 103178. We'll be covering the topic of underrated and hidden gems of the horror genre in the 1970s. And I mean, before we move on, Derek, it's great to have you. How did you start with get into horror movies? Your all-time favorite, and I mean even the 1970s, their output, it's quite rich. So what's your take on it?
Thanks, first of all, for having me. It's an honor to be able to join in and do this. The horror community is exceptional. It really is. And I have found
They are.
that on Instagram especially, that is a niche of people that are genuinely good people that care about each other and love talking about horror. I have been doing this now, gosh, I think close to 4 years on Instagram, seems like. Somewhere around there.
Ah.
And I started it up because I didn't have anyone around me to talk about it. Nobody really wanted to talk about horror stuff like I do, and so I found that there were people on Instagram that did, and I just kind of went from there with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the whole community, like you said, it's exceptional, and it's. I recall that it was 11 years ago, the first time and only time so far that I've watched Cannibal Holocaust, and I watched it with friends who wanted to watch it, but it's very very difficult to bring that subject up,
Yeah.
or even when you're talking about movies, because people immediately think you're crazy, and it's the exact opposite. It's actually quite an enjoyable movie with a very strong message and a very influential one. So you obviously have a passion for horror movies. How did it start?
I've loved horror from the very beginning. When I was just a kid, I would beg to get any kind of movie that was coming out. The first movie I remember getting that was R-rated was Pumpkinhead. My brother got it for me. He
Ooh.
rented it for me, and my mom didn't want me to see it, so he rented it for me without telling anybody, and that was the first R-rated that I saw. Most of what I saw was through late night, late night videos. Like it was with Joe Bob Briggs,
Uh-huh.
USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried, Elvira. A lot of those kind
Ooh.
of shows late at night is how I kind of first kind of jumped into it. Found out I loved it, and it's just kind of grown from there and gotten bigger and bigger over the years to where now I'm full blown a horror junkie. So.
Listen, that's amazing. I had no idea that Gilbert Gottfried had or hosted a horror-related show in the past. I mean, his voice is quite memorable, to
Yeah.
put it politely, but I had no idea he was involved in it. I just thought he was really a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, it was.
I'll need to look it up.
It was USA Up All Night, and on the USA channel, and it was Gilbert and Rhonda Shear. The two of them,
Oh, wow.
they sort of hosted a whole array of movies. Definitely for late night viewers. Definitely not the kind of thing you put on during the day, but for
Yeah.
a teenage kid watching them, they were great. I loved them.
Fantastic, and from all the obviously Pumpkinhead it's a classic,
It is.
and from all the rated R and even well, the PG-13 ones, from all the subgenres, from all the ratings, from even from global cinema, what do you have like a preference? Is it the slash? I for one, I tend to side with 1980s slashers. That's my go-to pick, but I also enjoy a bit of body horror, psychological horror. What's your favorite subgenre?
I have probably, I would say, three top subgenres that I kind of toggle back and forth between, and that would be creature features, monsters, any kind of lore, anything
Wow.
to have to do with that. I love Korean horror, and I love anthologies. I don't care if they're cheesy stories or not. And I think a large part of that anthology love is because of shows like Tales from the Crypt, which told the stories,
Ooh.
every episode. So an anthology was simply that. It was just three stories, usually four stories, somewhere around there, mixed together. And so those three subgenres, I've always been fascinated with monsters. I love the Korean horror stuff. They've got some amazing things out there, and then yeah, anthologies.
Anthologies. So, I mean, I would say that Korean horror, not it's not that I'm not a fan. I just haven't had the opportunity to watch anything yet. I did watch a couple of Japanese ones, but I know it's different leagues, different sports altogether. The creature features, yeah, I do really enjoy them. Although I guess as a '90s child, I grew up with the wrong version of Godzilla, but we did get the Japanese ones. So basically, I think that like before the movie premiered on a Friday, and basically during the whole week, starting on Sunday, this was during summer vacation. There was a TV channel that was showing like the best five Godzilla movies from the Tojo era and everything.
Nice.
And it was like it was really you kind of see the evolution from the original one from 1954 until then you move to the ones where he fight everybody else
Right.
in the 60s, then when he has the kid, and then the one where they Godzilla 1985, I think, where they shot additional scenes for the American release with Burgess Meredith. So I did watch a couple of them, and one of my favorites is actually the Swamp Thing with the Wes Craven 1982 original.
Yes, it's great. I love that one.
It's really good. And I see the best for last, or the one I relate to the most, anthology, because I got into Tales from the Crypt. I think last year, because a lot of episodes are available for free on YouTube, and I mean the star power there. You have Demi Moore, you have Tom Hanks, Michael J. Fox, Arnold Schwarzenegger directing. It's amazing, right? And it's really well executed. I would say that I also, long before I got into the Tales from the Crypt, I got into Creepshow, the first two,
Yeah.
right? And I think actually the second one, I do enjoy the one where they all go swimming and they're attacked by that
The Raft.
black blob. Yeah, the raft. That's the title. That's my favorite one.
Yeah, the Raft is really one that stuck with me as a kid and just absolutely scared me. We had something similar to where we used to swim when I was a kid, and everybody was terrified of that. And you get on something like that, and you're just looking for this blob to come around, and that thing haunted me for a long time. That one story alone.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that one is pretty much like Jaws, right? It's quite
Yeah.
universal. As long as if you ever say, "Did you ever swim?" Great. So you'll relate to the story because it's exactly like Jaws, I guess. And even though the trailer gives away the ending, which I was so pissed, but I think it still holds up and it's still very chilling. When it comes to anthologies, there's one on my list that I haven't watched yet, and that's the Trilogy of Terror. And it matches because we're talking about 70s horror gems, and now we're going into, you mentioned the anthology preference. So I haven't seen this one. I don't know if you have.
Oh yeah.
What's your take on it?
Trilogy of Terror. I mean, for the most part, you're really watching it just for one particular episode in it, and that's the Zuni Warrior. I mean, Karen Black is excellent in all three of the stories. I believe there's three. I can't remember for sure, but it is she's excellent in all of those. Of course, most people remember the doll more than anything, and that was actually based on Richard Matheson's short story, and Richard is a large part of the '70s stuff. He did a lot of those screen plays, and he did a lot of short stories that a lot of those kind of movies were based on. And Trilogy of Terror is definitely one that you should not miss.
Well, it's definitely on my list, and I know Karen Black from non horror related performances, but I'm very curious because again, on cable when I was a kid, Twilight Zone, the original one from the 50s, was on the whole time, and then later the 1980s version, and even Night Gallery, right? All Rod Serling's
Right.
creations. And so I really more with the Night Gallery because you'll have two, even three stories in the same episode. I kind of like grew with that, despite not being alive in the 70s when it
Yeah.
originally aired. So I do have, I do really enjoy the way those stories are structured, sometimes self-contained. So it's really, I really like them. But yeah, I agree with you that there's always one that stands out, and I've heard about the doll one from the trilogy of terror, so that's that's definitely on my list.
Well, it's definitely one that would always stick with you. You won't forget that kind of thing.
Cool. So yeah, that definitely needs to. It's on my list, and it's a perfect segue to the topic where we were going to talk about today, which is the 1970s horror gems. And I mean, for me, it's for cinema overall, and specifically for the horror genre, it was a game-changing era, right? You had from Rosemary's Baby in 1968 until 1979, you had a string of titles that changed the face of horror. You have the beginning or movies that defined or helped to create the blueprint for the slasher genre. So Halloween, Black Christmas, even the town that dreaded sundown. You have the psychological horror with The Exorcist, Carrie, and The Omen, the giallo boom, the great Italian cinema, and even the two directors who took the body horror genre a step beyond, David Lynch and David Cronenberg, got their first. They began to be noticed by audiences and critics alike. I mean, in the 70s, what's your overall take? Is it just me that I think that I try to look at the past with rose tinted glasses, or do you agree that it was a changing
I
decade?
think that people tend to look back in general with things that if they grew up watching them, that's something that they're going to love more than others. And it could be a really terrible movie, but if you grew up with it, that's something you love. As far as the 70s go, there's such a spectrum of types of movies, because there's some really good gems in the 50s and the 60s. There's some really good stuff that I have discovered and found. But based on, like you said, when Rosemary's Baby hit from about 68 and forward, the 70s is where horror really hit its stride. And that's where you will find some of the very best movies out there that fall into that category. You'll find some of the worst, too. But at the same time, there are really some incredible things. So much so that I've wanted to do a series on 70s for a long time. I've got a long list of ideas to do themes on my page, but 70s is one I'd love to do, but there's so much that the scope of it is daunting. So I've never really tackled it other than do it in small portions and stuff, because there are so many great ones out there to talk about.
Well, first of all, I'm a fan of your work. Like I said before, the way the combination pairing and even the visuals, they're amazing. I specifically loved how you took The Exorcist and The Exorcist 3, and like most of the civilized world, you choose to forget The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. I value that because I mean I've been trying to forget that I saw it ever since the only time I watched it. So I mean, kudos to you. Hopefully this episode will allow, or even to get some ideas, or even to structure and discuss some of those gems and those hidden treasures of 1970s horror. So I mean, the purpose here, and again, this is for the benefit of the listeners. We in the audience, we are going to talk about not about the popular ones like The Exorcist, Jaws, or even Carrie. There might be some derivative work, and we'll mention them, but the goal here today is actually to go and talk about those movies that don't get enough attention. And I mean, have a short list of five, but I'll leave the expert, resident expert and guest Derek to take the lead on his picks. So Derek, over to you.
You had asked me for five, and again, that does waive
Yeah.
five really good ones, like Jaws, for instance. Jaws is an all-time favorite there.
Yeah.
But when you start looking into some
Yeah.
true, I mean, the word gem gets thrown around so much lately, but when you really look at some of the ones
Yeah.
that just are overlooked, is a word I like to use. You forget about them; they sit to the side, and you're like, "Oh, I forgot about that," or someone told me that was a really good book, good movie. Excuse me, to watch, and I came
Yeah.
up with five that I thought was good, but I have a hard time coming up with just one or five or 10 or 20 of anything. So I've got a long list that we can go over, but definitely five that I think people should definitely look at or take a closer look at, that I don't feel get talked about enough, or surprisingly come across people that have never even heard of them, much less seen them. So just jumping off, I don't really have a particular order. One off
go
the
for it.
top would be what I would label as an action horror, and that's Race with the Devil. Now that's with Peter Fonda. He's leading that. There's a whole bunch of people from the I think Hot Lips from MASH is in it. Can't think of her name at the moment.
Ooh.
I
Sally
think
Kellerman?
so.
Okay.
So Race with the Devil is just an exceptional movie where you've got these guys that are out on a vacation, the two couples on an RV, and they pull off on some property, because I guess you could do that back then. They just pull off on someone's property. They camp for the night. Well, they go and camp in the middle of a satanic ritual, apparently, and because they're seen, they're then chased all across Texas, and everywhere they go, people are in on it. There's like a web of Satan worshipers, and everywhere they go, someone is there watching them and trying to kill them, and it's just nonstop action. A lot of fun. Crazy stuff happens with snakes. Rattlesnakes jump out of cabinets. The dog gets hung. If there's a dog in a movie, it's gonna die, especially in horror. So that's pretty much what happens with it. I won't even come close to giving away the ending on it, but it's definitely action packed.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of that one. I do enjoy Peter Fonda, so it also stars Warren Oates. Wow, and Loretta Swit.
Yes.
So she played Hot Lips in the TV show. I was thinking Sally Kellerman from the 1970 movie. Okay, wow, this sounds like a good one. And I mean, is this influenced in any way by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I mean, given the Texas location, is it or is it very different and more of a Roger Corman
It's
kind of
definitely
movie?
leans more towards Roger as far as that goes. It's not on the level of Texas Chainsaw as far as the violence, the type of just everything that you're experiencing with Chainsaw, but it definitely takes advantage of a lot of those exploitation type movies of the 70s, where everything is, especially with the Satan worshiping, that's a big key factor in a lot of 70s movies. And so I think it's more along those lines, where it kind of just jumps on the bandwagon of what everyone is wanting to talk about and watch, and that's seances, Satan worship, possessions, that type of thing.
Wow. So definitely that one is on my list. I haven't heard of it. I would say that kickstarting my list with something equally as out there. I would go with the last item. So that's The Visitor, right? I don't know if you've seen that one, the 1979 Julio or Michael Paradise, as he likes to call himself, Italian-American movie.
I have.
Have you seen that one, The Visitor?
Gosh, I think around 10 years ago. I think
Yeah.
Glenn Ford is in that one.
Glenn Ford. It has
Lance
an all-star
Henriksen, I think,
cast.
was in it too.
You have Lance Henriksen, yes, and a bunch of famous directors. So John Huston, Sam Peckinpah, and you do have some heavyweights from the golden age of cinema, such as Shelley Winters and yeah, pretty much it's and Mel Ferrer. So it's an impressive movie. I would say that it's equally out there. It's that kind of Star Wars meets Carrie via The Omen. That's the best description because the plot is all over the place, right? And it has a very unique, funky soundtrack that sounds like something Pink Floyd thought wasn't good enough to include in The Dark Side of the Moon. It's I don't know, like it definitely leaves a mark. But yeah, it's zany and crazy. I don't know
I
your
definitely need to
thoughts.
revisit it. It has been a while. I know it's one of those things where again it's just it's a touchstone of all the things people were wanting to see at the time, kind of all in one movie. I mean, you got the possession, you've got the telekinetic powers, you've got all this the devil Satan worship type stuff in it mixed together, and it's just this whole mixture of things where it's definitely something to see for sure. It's a little sci-fi in all of it too.
And it, yeah, and I was about to say some tributes
Yeah.
to Close Encounters, especially the final sequence, and some ninja stuff, if I recall, because like the good guys, like they all jump around and it, like I don't know, there's a kung fu vibe there somewhere. It was just really too much when I watched it, so I can't really recall everything. But I would say that this sits definitely within the so bad that it's good, or kind of like you really need to watch this one, just for the
Yeah,
sake of it.
it's something that should be on everyone's '70s list at some point to see.
Oh, it's yeah, for sure. And your the next item on your list, what's the
It's got
next
about
recommendation?
6 different titles, but I typically go with Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. It's from it's I
Okay.
think the other title that it pretty much goes for is the Living Dead at Manchester Morgue.
Oh, so it's one of those Grindhouse movies, right? That they change the title for
Yeah,
every
it's
single country.
definitely got a title for every place it goes to. Um, but
Okay.
Let Sleeping Corpses Lie is pretty much the title I think most people might know it by. It was from about 1974, I think. I'm not familiar with the people in it as much as I do know it has Ray Lovelock in it. He's pretty much the main person that runs through everything. The general idea of it is, it's playing off of the zombie time during that time. All of the types of movies there, where you've got this town in Manchester where this village has got an agricultural. Excuse me, lost train of thought there for a 2nd. You may need to pause that to do your make a note of it.
That's all good.
But
I'll,
go ahead,
I'll
we can
do
start
yeah.
over.
Good.
So
Go for it.
Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, what really happens there is they're trying to do some type of thing with the Department of Agriculture, and it's creating this ultrasonic type situation, and it's not just getting rid of the pest control there. It's the problem is it's starting to make people that have like in the hospitals that have just died come back to life, and then it starts getting the corpses out of the morgue to come out, and then the graves, all of this. And these people come up to this at this time when all this is happening, and people start dying around them. Well, the crazy thing about this is it turns out to be also kind of a detective story. So this other detective thinks that this couple that's come into town is killing all these people. He has no idea that there's actual thing, and it sounds funny, but it actually doesn't come across as a comedy. It's actually straight up horror as far as that goes, and it's got some of the best gruesome scenes, and also that like. I don't know how to explain it, but more like there's a certain feel to it's probably all a set. You can tell that like in the Omen graveyard. I love that look and feel. It's a set, but I love that look and atmosphere about it. And a lot of this movie has that feel to it where some of it may not actually be out in the country. Some of it was done on a sound studio, but it looks so good and like I said, some of the best, most gruesome deaths in it, and it's one of my favorites from that time period.
Yeah, I was just I did a quick Google research here, and we're talking about it also stars the role of the inspector is played by playwright Arthur
Yeah.
Kennedy. Wow, that's that's a lot of star power there. I was thinking as you were describing, I was thinking the whole description sounds like a serious take, like the plot from Return of the Living Dead, but with a serious
Yes,
tone,
it is. It is
right?
very much a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
take on Return of the Living. I mean, Night of the Living Dead. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I was talking about the 1980s one, the 1985 Return of the Living Dead, right, where they also come back to life. There's a reason, and there's the whole
yes,
like you mentioned the Department of Agriculture, right? I
it
think it's
is.
a toxic spill or
And,
something
yeah,
that
and
they
you can
have in
see
the
how
other
they
one, right?
pretty much turned
Yeah.
that into a farce, where they made it, more of a horror comedy in back in there with the '80s on that. So yeah, they very well could have taken
Yeah,
some of
yeah.
that from this.
Yeah. No, no, no. I mean, that's another one for my list. With the Spanish directors, because it came up that the director was Spanish from Barcelona. I was thinking one that I've seen recently, and it's from the '80s, but Pieces, right, by
Yes.
Juan Piquer Simon. Uh, if I was impressed by that one. It's surprisingly good,
Pieces is
I
one of
would
those
say.
that it is definitely something someone should see. I think I've always thought I like the title, but I've always thought it should also be called Bastard, 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 because that's all she screams at one point. It's this whole stream
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
of just screaming out the word bastard. That should have been the title.
But I don't think then the tagline would work, right? It's exactly what you think it is. Or maybe it does, right? Bastard! Exactly. It's exactly what you think it is.
Right.
The guy's a bastard. Okay, okay. Maybe it works. Maybe it works well. Okay, cool. That's great. I mean, I was thinking still within it's not fair to think or to say it's overlooked because I think it has enough recognition. There was even a remake and a sequel of the remake. So Joe Dante's Piranha, right, the 1978
Yeah.
one, and I recall watching it again on cable TV. I was probably 9 or 10, and. I was just really I love Jaws, right? And I was crazy about it for the first time I watched the movie when I was 7, and I was oh wow, this must be like Jaws, and it was different.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it, and I think it is a great movie, and it gets thrown in the lot with even Jaws 2, Orca, all the other shark or whale themed movies from that time, even that Mexican one, Tintorera. And I mean, I think Piranha deserves to be in a league of its own for what it really is, right? I think the execution is perfect. There's even the comedy pacing. It's amazing when the other guy goes, "Sir, it's about the piranha." It's like, what about the fucking piranha? Well, they're eating the guests, sir. When they deliver the whole line. It's just like so casual that it's really. I think that's the comedy
It is.
timing that's
It
just
is.
perfect,
I love
right?
it.
Right. So I mean, I love that
Piranha.
one. Yeah.
It's definitely one that absolutely should be seen. And yeah, it's no Jaws, but it is just so terrifying to know that that's in your lake. I mean, in your river, going down the stream, and it's one that's always stuck with me as a kid.
Yeah.
Joe Dante, he really did an exceptional job with it, and I absolutely love it. It's one of those
Yeah.
where the character of Keenan Wynn in that I think he's Jack. He's the old man by the river.
Yes.
And he lives off the land, he lives off
Yes.
the river, and he goes into this whole beautiful spill about how perfect it is to live where he lives, and he's such a good person. And I remember growing up, that was the most gut-wrenching part for me, is to see what happens to him. And I mean, because it's pretty gruesome what happens
Yeah.
to poor Jack.
Yeah.
And I always
Yes.
felt bad about that one. And I always
it's all
felt bad
there.
about that. And then I think it was, around the 40th anniversary, I was doing some kind of prep for my page and looking up some behind the scenes. And I see this behind the scenes where he has nothing but bone on his legs, and they're all bloody and everything in that scene. And it's behind the scenes in the middle of a take, and he is laughing so hard. And I don't know what it was about it, but it really made me realize, of course, it's a movie, but it made me realize just how funny of a moment that must have been for them during that time period, and that whole thing that I used to feel so bad about now just completely altered and changed after seeing that behind the scenes.
Wow, I'll have to look at the behind the scenes photo, because I mean, I know that there are some deleted scenes that I was able to watch recently, but I've never seen the behind the scenes one, and I think it's amazing. And one thing, when well the last episode with Liam, we went about Ted on Friday the 13th Part 2 as being the outlier, and we discussed that character, but. Piranha. Can somebody please tell me what was that creature with stop motion animation in the lab? And you know what I'm talking about. That what the hell
no
was
idea
that?
what's going on there, but there was a lot of strange things for sure.
And that lab was crazy, but I think the piranhas were the least of the concern. They could have done something about that creature, because we don't really know what it was. Yeah, but I mean, I really enjoyed it. I've never seen the '95 version, directed by Roger Corman, I think.
The remakes are okay, but I mean, I love this original one more than any of the others.
Yeah, no, definitely. I knew that. Well, now knowing that you enjoy the creature, although this is not a specific creature movie, but I would say it's still
it counts. Yeah,
close enough. You'd appreciate the piranha take. Okay, so over to you for your next recommendation.
I'd go with one that I didn't actually see until. See, I don't post about a movie unless I've watched it on my page. I'm big about that, just because I don't want to put something out there and then someone asks me questions on it, and so I don't remember why I was researching and watching this particular movie, but I know I was doing it for the page and came across the movie Death Dream. I don't think that was the name of it. I think it goes, it's one of those that goes by another name. I think it was Dead of Night. But Death Dream is what it's kind of probably known about the most, and I think it's from 1974, and it's one of those that's by Bob Clark. Now, Bob, he had this crazy spectrum of movies. He's a guy that did, I believe, Porky's, A Christmas Story, and Black Christmas. And so you've got these heavy hitters, obviously, that from different types of genres. And then you've got Death Dream, which nobody ever talks about. You've got big names here that he's done. And yeah, it's not the best of these movies by any means. But there's a lot to unpack in this particular movie. And in a large part, it's this whole what happens to Vietnam vets when they come back from the war and how they're changed. Well, this particular one, he's changed, and without giving anything away, there's something very different about him when he returns home, and people just chalk it up to he's shell shocked. He's got some issues, and he doesn't know. They don't know really what's going on, but they're giving him his space because he's been through who knows what kind of hell. So they give him that space, but in the end, there's clearly something severely wrong with him, and it's all about to come out, and I mean it's one that I don't think enough people really talk much about. It takes place down in South Florida, and there's a drive-in scene. There's a lot of good little stuff like that, and very southern type movie, and it's one that definitely should be seen.
Oh, wow, yeah, I mean, in 1974, so yeah, the same year as Black Christmas, right? So maybe there's a reason why, or it shouldn't be overshadowed, but it is, because the latter is so iconic. I was thinking, so I haven't seen that one, but I think it would be nicely paired up with a semi-horror movie, The Ninth Configuration.
I think that would pair well, yes.
The William Peter Blatty one, also taking. I think there's a weird vibe in that movie, even the setting, right? Because it's after the Vietnam War, and again recovering vets. But the whole setting makes you think of Michael Mann's The Keep, right? So it kind of feels like it's set in Germany or like I don't know, Central Europe. It's I don't know, but it was a very good movie. And I was thinking it would be nicely paired up, but definitely that one I need to that one's on my goes on my list. Death Dream or The Dead of Night, like you said. Um, so yeah, I mean, is it how would you compare this? Like, would it be closer to the ninth configuration or closer to say Rolling Thunder with I don't know if you've seen that one with
Well, it's
William
hard
Devane.
to. I don't remember if I've seen Rolling Thunder. I have to think about it to see if it would compare.
Hmm.
Without giving away what's really wrong with him, I don't want to really compare too much because I don't want to say. I could tell you that it's definitely along the lines of some others that we've already discussed, but I don't want to. Like I said, I don't want to give away really what's wrong with him because it's just such a fun way of the reveal of what's going on with him. And it's one that I am surprised actually that no one ever took this and has remade it. To my knowledge, no one's ever done that. I've never seen a movie quite like this one, how it plays out. But I'll have to think about what would. I mean,
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
like I said, I'm building it up more than I think I should, but it's one that I'd have to really think about what would pair so perfectly with it. In fact, I might need to add it to my double feature night and come up with something. I'll have to let you know.
No, that one is. I think from all the ones you mentioned so far, this one again, not discounting the other ones, but I think this one goes straight to the top of the list because at least on my watch list, because definitely I do enjoy like the Deer Hunter and Coming Home and also Rolling Thunder, and so for its the historical value and the overall character analysis. So I think a horror movie that deals with the horrors of war, it's kind of like poetic. So I will definitely need to fast track this one to
Yeah,
the top.
it's one that I think you'll enjoy it a lot. It's if considering the types of movies that you're choosing here as far as gems go and forgotten movies that need to be
Yeah.
seen. I definitely would add this one to your list for sure. Anyone that's listening in should definitely look into this one.
Yeah, I will.
know,
Already made a note
uh,
here.
I'm sorry.
On my
I was just going to
yeah.
say the thing about the '70s movies that I have found a great deal of these are actually available on YouTube, and a lot of people don't realize it. The full versions because you can't find
Yeah.
them in other places. They may not be streaming. You may not even be able to purchase them. So there's a ton out there. I think I watched Kingdom of Spiders the other day with William Shatner on YouTube because I couldn't find it anywhere else at the time, and so. I believe Death Dream was one that I found there too, for that matter, at the time. Of course, I mean they're all over the place to be able to locate them, but I do know YouTube ends up being more of a treasure trove when it comes to '70s horror than a lot of people may realize.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm with you there. I've seen in the early days of YouTube, you could even find the
Oh, yeah.
Friday the 13th Part 9.
those-
So Jason Goes to Hell. It
Those
was
early days, you could
streaming
find just
there.
about anything on there. There was no one looked at the copyrights on anything. They just
Yeah.
they just let you pretty much post whatever you wanted.
Yeah. It's upload and off you go. I mean, I was thinking, is as we kind of like covered at least a couple of titles here. Do you also collect? Do you own them on Blu-ray, DVD? Do you tend to value that owning those classics if you can? Because I from time to time I do buy some from Shout Factory releases. Right. So, what's your take on it? Do you also collect from, say, some special
Well, it's a good
releases?
question
Or
because I get asked from time to time this because of I mean if you're going to go by the title of horror junkie, what does that mean in a physical sense? Do I have this entire giant room of stuff? I'd love to say I do. Unfortunately, I have two little girls, so having two little girls at home, I have to be careful because of the little girls I have. They get scared very easily.
yeah,
So I don't really put a whole lot out there. So over the years, I've not really collected a lot. That said, I have an entire bookshelf of nothing but horror novels, and then I have all of my DVDs that I collected over the years. I actually have them out of the boxes and into the holders for them all, just to kind of pack them away. But with that said, as digital media has jumped in, I now find myself purchasing more digital media, more 4K movies on Amazon and places like that, on Apple, just depending on where I can find it. And I've started collecting more digitally so that wherever I am, I can watch whatever I want to watch there on my phone, or if I go to someone's place and all I've got to do is log in and I can get everything I want. I absolutely respect and commend the people who collect. I would love to do that, and I'd love to display it. I've got some things, but I don't really, like I said, I can't really display a lot of it the way things are. And it's one of those things where that's why I love the outlet that I have on Instagram, because I can put things out there like that. But as far as how I don't buy as much any type of Blu-ray or any type of movies as much as I used to, unless it's something really special. Like I know I got Jaws 45th anniversary last year. Those are the kind of collector's items that I'd like to have of some of my favorites. But for general movies, I pretty much just buy them now digitally.
Well, that's a fair shot. I mean, I I was thinking I still have the 25th anniversary DVD
Yeah.
of Jaws. So yeah, and I did get the 35th or something, the one that included the posters. So yeah, but I get it. It's good if you can manage the time, and of course, if there's not an audience that's well. That would be inappropriate for them, or that they would be get scared. So I completely get it. It's quite it's considerate and thoughtful. As you were talking about the Spanish British movie Let the
Yeah.
Sleeping Corpses Lie, I was thinking that it's a good segue to the one that's also on my list called the
I
Sentinel,
love the
right, by
Sentinel.
Michael Winner, who I believe yeah, he directed a couple of those action movies. I don't know if it was Death Wish or something like that. I think he was involved something with Canon films. But I think the Sentinel it's quite good. And again, it's a very odd movie because it tries to take the psychological and even the whole tone of The Omen and combine it with the disaster movies of the 1970s. You have a cast with Ava Gardner, Martin Balsam, Jose Ferrer, Eli Wallach, and Arthur Kennedy, and then you have newcomers like Christopher Walken and Jeff Goldblum. It's like they're the first movies
Yeah.
they're on, and it's just it's an interesting movie because it's a strange mix, right? I don't know if you agree, but the pace it's quite slow. It relies on some well executed sequences, namely the cat's
Well,
birthday
when
party.
you say the word strange, that's an understatement when
Um,
you're talking about the cast.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's a stellar cast of characters. But yeah, these characters, they're definitely they're weird people. There's some strange people lives in this place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like even yeah, Rosemary's Baby meets
I can see that.
The Omen with Via the Towering Inferno or something like that. I don't know, like it's an odd one, but I mean visually I think it's
Yeah.
well executed, and I just it keeps you. I don't think it's that obvious, right? I've spoken with fans that think that even the whole development and even the ending, it's quite. Oh yeah, I figured it out like 5 minutes into the picture, and I'm like, okay, I didn't. Maybe I'm not as sharp as you guys, but I don't know. What's your take? Am I wrong? Is it or do you also agree that it's not
Well, this is one of
that
those when
obvious? Or maybe I need to watch
This
more
is one
horror
of those when
movies.
you start looking at things like the trailers and stuff, and they'll just ruin it for you when it comes to figuring things out. This is one of those where even if you did figure it out, the ride alone of this one is just so incredibly sinister and so just I mean fun. For lack of word, there it is just a wild ride to see how it all develops. Even if you were to figure out what the whole purpose of this movie is, then just go with it because it is just a wild ride of. It is a great Rosemary Meets Baby type thing where they're all in they're all in this apartment. They've all got some kind of agenda or something's off about it. You can't really tell what's going on. Some crazy stuff happens, and yeah, it's all leading to a big thing. But like I said, the wild ride of it, even if you figure it out, is worth it.
Yeah, I
Mm,
completely
yeah,
agree. And I
I
think I really
completely
enjoyed
agree,
it.
and I
And
think I
I
really enjoyed
guess
it. And I guess the benefit of watching that movie in 2021, or even 2020, when I did watch it, is the fact that you can look back and go, "Oh, look, that's Christopher Walken, and that's Chris Sarandon, and that's Jeff Goldblum, and all those actors and stars that you know and that became famous throughout the years." And at the same time, you got Mickey from
Right.
Rocky, just delivering a
Yeah,
creepy
Burgess
performance.
Meredith is incredible.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, Burgess,
He
man,
he
yeah,
is
I
absolutely
agree.
incredible. He is one of those that he steps on the screen and he just like oozes this incredible charm, and also he's got this underlying just evil about him. Even in the good movies, there's something about it behind his eyes where he just like, you don't want to mess with this
Hmm.
guy in a dark alley kind of thing, where he will just put some kind of hex on you. He always, he was the Penguin in Batman, and he just has this, like I said, this underlying almost like
Hmm.
just evil about him that's so great, and that's why he does so well with this movie. He's just perfect for it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
completely agree. And I
I
think,
completely
yeah,
agree,
I
and I
guess I was
think,
so
yeah, I guess I was
starstruck by
so
the whole development that I
starstruck by the
recall
whole
his
development
performance
that
and I
I
recall
recall
it
his
being
performance, and
creepy.
I recall it being creepy.
But I'll definitely need
But I'll
to
definitely
revisit
need
this movie.
to revisit this movie.
It merits a second
It
viewing.
merits a
So
second viewing.
over to you
So
with your
over to
next
you with
entry.
your next entry.
Let's see. We talked about anthologies earlier, so one of the ones I picked. There were several anthologies from the '70s that I would definitely recommend. But one in particular that doesn't get talked about as much because the remake of it years later, Tales from the Crypt, was something that obviously overshadows it. But in 1972, they took from the comics and made the first Tales from the Crypt movie. Um, it was one that I remember seeing it. I wasn't young when I saw it. I was definitely an adult when I saw it, and I had already watched all the Tales from the Crypt. You know, the ones that we kind of grew up watching from the 80s and 90s there.
Hmm.
But this particular one, it has this. It obviously the Crypt Keeper is nowhere near as cool as John Cassier made it in HBO's version, um,
Hmm.
but the original version is one that I personally think that definitely should be seen. The stories in it, they're familiar. You'll definitely recognize them from the remake, from the show. Um, but it's definitely one that I think definitely people should see, should experience. It's the stories of all through the house. That's the one where Santa Claus is a serial
Oh yeah,
killer,
yeah,
Mm.
and it's
Oh
got
yeah,
Joan
yeah,
Collins
yeah.
in it. And
It's from
while
the
I do
pilot.
love the Tales from the Crypt version, it's more comical in a lot of ways. But Joan Collins handles it so perfectly in the original one, and I love the Santa Claus in the '80s, '90s version of it, but I love
yeah.
Joan Collins'
Yeah.
character in the original version of it. There are I think I want to say there's about four different versions. Four different stories in this anthology, and it started off. There's actually a sequel to it called Vault of Horror. I definitely pair those two together. I think I'm posting on that actually soon, but definitely see this first one if you get a chance.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of
Yeah,
that.
I wasn't aware.
I am familiar with
I am familiar with,
Joan
well,
Collins,
somewhat familiar with Joan
and her work
Collins and her
on
work
TV, but I haven't
on
seen that one
TV,
yet.
but I
I
haven't
will
seen that one yet.
definitely. It
I
wasn't
will
even on my
definitely.
to-do
I
list.
wasn't even. I think I read something. Yeah,
There
that
was a version, but
there
I'm
was
not
a version,
familiar.
but I'm not
So much
familiar.
to watch.
So much
She
to
didn't do a lot
watch.
of
Great.
Sure.
That one
she didn't
goes
do a
on the
lot of
list for
horror,
sure.
Joan Collins, um, but I'm surprised actually after seeing this how she didn't do something else around that time that would have merited some meteor role type situation instead of just one segment from an anthology. But she's great in it. But there's also Peter Cushing, which you know. Peter Cushing, anything he's in, I don't care if it's a bad movie or not. He's gonna be make a stellar stellar point when he walks on to the screen, just like all the others as far as Vincent Price and the others go from the Unholy Trinity. But it's a situation where Peter's great in it. It's a lot of fun little segments, and it's definitely something that I love to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was going through.
Yeah, I was going through. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
5
All right.
stories on this one.
Okay.
Okay.
And they're taken
Wow.
from the original comics too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have this one goes on the list as well because I'm only familiar with the TV series. I was aware that there was a movie, but I've never watched it. And definitely, Peter Cushing, that's one of the heavyweights. You have to go for it. Cool. I think my next entry would be and then it's over to you. I actually had to replace because I didn't have time to revisit this movie, and it's been ages, so I didn't feel very comfortable talking about Colin Eggleston's Long Weekend. So I actually went back to one that I know that it's overlooked. And that's one that I shared with you, and I paired with Carrie, right? With The Fury. That's Brian De Palma's The Fury from 1978. And I think I really don't know why. If it's people just thinking, oh, it's De Palma hit it big with Carrie, so he decided to follow up with the exact same movie. First, I don't think that's the case. I think it's still very different. And I mean, it's Amy Irving. She's in she stars in both movies, but I think the Fury is. It's great, even if it's just because the focus on both Kirk Douglas and I guess John Cassavetes, who's great in everything he stars in. I think it's just it's a very different movie from Carrie, because Carrie, it's pretty much self-contained. It's an adaptation from a Stephen King novel. I think the Fury combines again the success and the themes from Carrie and The Omen with the governmental paranoia thrillers of the 1970s, because it's pretty much it's the government going after us, right, and trying to explore our resources or something like that. That kind of vibe, right, that goes throughout the whole movie. I don't know, what's your opinion on The Fury versus Carrie? Is it really just is it awarded to just label it as the non-official Carrie sequel, or do you think it's a standalone entry and it should be
I think it's a
viewed as
standalone
such?
for sure. I mean, there are connections. There's obviously the telekinesis. There's obviously, both of them are based on a novel. I think John Ferris wrote The Fury, if I'm not mistaken. Just as King wrote Carrie. They're both based on a novel, and they both involve powers of the mind. Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily stop there. But it's certainly the most of the connections as far as the biggest point of why you would put the two together. I absolutely see the ties, and I think it would be an excellent, like you suggested, an excellent double feature. They are two very different movies, though, and should be seen as such. You should definitely set them apart, because I mean, obviously in Carrie, you've got a mother figure who's overbearing, and Carrie all her life has had issues in having to fight against other people, and finally she just doesn't want to take it anymore, and she just loses it, and all the better for incredible cinema there. But when it comes to this one, speaking of incredible cinema, there are some things that happen in this movie that I don't really think they had done before. Certainly didn't do it in Carrie. I mean, Carrie set things on fire, sure, and she was able to move objects and such. But this, I mean, there's a spinning woman in the middle of the room, slinging blood everywhere. There's these glowing eyes. I mean, Kirk Douglas alone is excellent in this. He really sells it, and then it's kind of like half. It's almost like a. I wouldn't say cop drama, but it's almost like part of it is this action drama kind of thing, and the other part is this horror, and the horror really doesn't really fully set in until the end, but getting there is so enjoyable to see how Kirk Douglas does everything he can to try to find his son, including bringing Amy Irving's character in, and she's excellent. She doesn't want to do what she's doing, but she's forced to have to be a part of this. And John Cassavetes, he's this detective that's hot on the case, and he's just determined to do what's supposed to be done. Wait a minute, John. I have to think. John's not. Is he
John Cassavetes?
No,
yeah.
CIA agent. I'm trying to think of. I'm mixing up their roles. John Cassavetes. He's not a detective, is he? He's. I've already forgotten what it was. I need to revisit myself, actually.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. He's CIA, yeah, because the whole movie now I'm thinking they have the whole opening shots
That's right, yeah.
set in Israel, right? Where you have Kirk Douglas, Peter character, and his son, and they meet John Cassavetes. I think it was Benjamin, and they mention, oh, he's from the agency as well, so he's CIA, yeah.
It's definitely I love
Yeah.
The Fury in that it does get overshadowed. Certainly as a De Palma film, but it does get overshadowed because of Carrie. But it is a really great.
Yeah.
It's one of those where once everything sets in without giving anything away, the ending is just it'll just about break your heart how the ending is, and I love it.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean, I was thinking right now how there are some sequences that reminded me, well, obviously better executed of some of the moments of that movie that I mentioned in the beginning, The Exorcist 2. Namely the whole, what was it called, the synchronizer or something, when they get that machine early on in the movie. So I was thinking wow, but The Fury does it so much better, right? And I think, I'm not saying, okay, let's compare every single horror movie that has a hint of psychological horror to The Exorcist 2, and then everything should win awards. But I'm saying that for a movie that was released a year after in '78, it's really good, and compared to what was being made elsewhere, I just think it's a fantastic take. This one it's definitely one of my favorites. I wasn't aware it was adapted from a book, but we'll have to look into that book.
It's surprising how many, especially during that period, people talk so much about wanting an original idea. They don't want to see an original idea. People, truthfully, original ideas are great, and there's some really great ones out there. There's some exceptional movies based on original ideas, but people don't go to the movies to typically see that. They love the remakes. They love the based on stories, and the 70s is a trove of things based on books. And this is one of them. We talked about the other movie you brought up, The Sentinel. I love that book. That's an excellent story. There's another one, Burnt Offerings, based on the book. Both the movie and the book are exceptional. There's so many out there that you don't realize until you start looking up. So many of them. You mentioned Trilogy of Terror. That's Richard Matheson. And so much of that is based on an author that created these ideas, and that's why we have so many compelling stories that we have in the 70s, was because some of them the character development in some of them were so well done in the books that they were able to have a basis to build on for these movies.
No, I'm with you there. I think the whole difficulty from time to time is actually to find those books or to being able to buy them. You wouldn't guess how. Not years, and I'm not actively looking every day, but I do have some alarms for because I'm trying to get a hold of a copy of Jaws 2, but not the novelization of the movie, the original screenplay, when it wasn't Jeannot Rock that was directing the movie, the one where they talk about the mafia involvement. It was grittier. So I've been trying to score that book for ages, and I still haven't been able to get it. So definitely I want to get the book. So over to you to your next few
my
takes.
Final of the top 5, if I'm counting right. I chose one that to me is a heavy hitter for the 70s, but I chose it because one, I love it, and two, I have constantly surprised at how many people have not seen it, and that is The Legend of Hill House. And that was from 1973,
Oh.
which is the same time as Exorcist. Same time period. And again, this is another Richard Matheson story. He wrote the novel, I think it was a short novel called Hill House, is all it was called. And this is The Legend of Hill House with Roddy McDowall, Gail Honeycutt. There's just you'd recognize the people more than their names, and this one is one of those situations where you've got a stellar cast. You may not know them by name, but you see them and you see how well they all gel together so well. And this is just an incredibly creepy movie when it comes to a haunted house and what goes on and deals with possessions and a lot of great scenes in this, from flying things to evil cats. It's pretty great. I love it.
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen that one. Again, what you were saying, a lot of people haven't, and I was like, "Yep, that's me. I haven't seen it." But sounds like good fun. I mean, yeah, definitely. I guess I was so many great movies from the '70s that it's just like when I look back, I thought I actually seen more than I actually did, and so there's a lot to catch up there. So that one is definitely
Well, I'm with you on
my
that.
list.
There's so many out there that, like I was saying
yeah.
earlier, I've wanted to do a whole series on that on my own page, but there's such a trove of them that it's going to take a long time to really go through the bulk of them, and because there's so many great ones out there. I can't remember. I want to say I looked it up, and the 80s had the most horror movies made, but the 70s came very close. 80s largely because video rentals came out, VHS.
Boom,
The slasher boom,
A lot of the genres jumped in there, subgenres, but in this case, the 70s, there's so many out there, and there's such a spectrum of them that there's a lot of people that just really haven't ever seen them, which is why I'm glad we're talking about it, because while there's so many, most people focus on the 80s and that type of thing, it is really the 70s are the roots. I think you said earlier, the foundation, the blueprint of a lot of what we might know growing up watching. These are where they got these from. A lot of those ideas and things they did they came from these movies. All the possession movies we see today, that started in this, and mostly in the 70s as far as what we saw there, and we're seeing such an influx, and it's almost like a revival of what we loved about the 70s and even the 80s now.
I was thinking because you were mentioning like the possession one. I was thinking that I watched the trailer for it on YouTube, and it's called Beyond the Door, and it's a massive ripoff on I think on The Exorcist, right?
They definitely have borrowed some things from it. It's not bad, but it's so many people try to make The Exorcist recreate it and that type of thing, and it's one of those things where just let it set aside and be what it is, and then tell your own story a different way, and you could have a much more successful movie if you weren't trying to top what was done in the past. Just do your own thing, and everybody wants to top and shock and awe and or vice versa, turn around and be so arty about it that it just creates lesser movies when it comes to how people over attempt to do things. There are some really good possession stuff out there, really incredible stuff, and I mean, obviously last year's Host, if you saw it on Shudder, was, I love that was an incredible seance type thing. They really nailed it. There is hope that obviously that people know how to do some really exceptional things like that. But a lot of that still stems from this era, this decade of between late 60s all the way through late 80s. There's a whole segment of there. Then that's where everybody got all of this stuff from, and that's why people love going back to it, because it's a sense of comfort. It's a sense of being able to. That's something I grew up watching, or I love this. It may not be as great as they can make a movie now. They may have so many more technological advances now, but I love that feel of it takes you back, and that's what the 70s and 80s type movies, whether you grew up in them or not. I mean, I grew up late 79. I was born the last week of 79. I'm an 80s kid, but I still watched a lot of these 70s movies as a kid and a teenager because they were still playing on the TV, and they whether they're good or bad, it doesn't matter to me. They're good, and that's all that matters is to you. If you love them,
Yeah.
then who cares if everybody else thinks it's a bad movie? Just go for it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. I'm with you there, and I mean, it's interesting. You were talking about Shutter, and I wanted to ask you if, and we talked about Creep Show, and I know that they made at least one season that came out last year, I think. Is it any good? Would you
I
recommend
love
if you've seen it?
the remake because they brought some people that were originally a part of it. Nicotero is a big part of the revival, and I think that's why it works so well. It has a feel of the original movies. It also has some of that Crypt Keeper type feel to it. I love them. I love the stories.
Oh, right.
They definitely they definitely take you back to what you love about the original Creep Show. So I would highly recommend it. And I believe the second season starts April 1st.
Really? Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm
Wow,
looking
that's
forward to
great.
what they do with it. They did a great little Christmas thing too. It's worth seeing.
Yes, I've heard. So basically, when the show was released in 2019, I was like, oh, I need to watch it. But then the timing was never right. And then last year, when the two Christmas specials were released, I was like, I need to watch it. And you're right. The new season will be released in less than a month. And I guess they already greenlit season 3. So
I would
we're
highly
good to go.
recommend it. It's definitely an excellent throwback to what we loved about the original anthology series.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Great news. Awesome news to know that at least they'll get more.
Yeah.
We'll get more episodes.
Well,
Any other great recommendations? I mean, we obviously talked about we touched upon I guess mostly psychological horror, right? And that was quite popular during the 70s. But again, we also mentioned some of the zombie titles, even some slasher influencers, if you will. Is there any what would be the next or one of the titles that you have there?
I could list. I could keep listing to as many as you want, but there are some really good ones that if you were making a list to go down, I would definitely look at some that, and it may not be for everybody, but I love that Hammer horror feel to it. And even if they're not a Hammer movie, they definitely have that feel, like Hands of the Ripper or The Creeping Flesh. Pretty much anything with Vincent Price, anything that has any of those groups of people in them, I would highly recommend them. Alice, Sweet Alice is a great little slasher that it's gotten a coming.
There you go.
It's got its due diligence. No, that's not the right word I'm trying to say. It's definitely one of those situations where people are talking about it more and more, and I'm glad to hear that because it's a lovely little creeper of a slasher.
I was thinking because I've seen Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, right? And then obviously that movie, because it was a hit, it influenced a lot of similar movies, even some of them starring Bette Davis, right? I mean, how
it's difficult because I'm not.
it's difficult because I'm not well read in that subgenre called the hag. What was it? The hag hacking?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever
I don't know.
really
They have
looked into it, but I've heard the term.
Okay. No, me neither. But that it pops up every now and then, and I was thinking, is it really a case of the way I approach, or the way some people may think of anything that followed Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, is the way we discussed or discourage people to approach the Fury, right? And you mentioned Alice, Sweet Alice, right? Is that in the same vein, the same tone?
I mean, Alice is one of those where you look into it and you're going to find who the killer is if you look up too much. You don't want to really look into finding out what's going on with Alice, other than know that it is about a little girl who is involved in some way with all of these very heinous acts surrounding her of these people. There's some really serious situations where she's involved in some way. You don't know what exactly is going on, but there's some very gruesome deaths with some of these, and Alice is one of those that it's one of those kind of movies that kind of sets itself apart. It's not your typical slasher. Obviously, it's dealing with a kid. There was some more, I'd say, in the 80s that dealt with more of the child slasher type situation. That's kind of Alice might have kind of been one of those that stemmed from that. I'm not well versed in a lot of those where that is the case. Obviously, there's Bad Seed from the 60s. There's several along those lines, but Alice is one of those that definitely spawned, I think, a lot of those types of things. I would not pair it so much as with that. I would definitely add it to some of those, like Bloody Birthday or something along those lines. But it's definitely one that I would highly recommend.
Cool.
Cool. I believe we still have time for a couple more of your suggestions. I maxed out, so over to you. Glad to hear more, as I keep on writing.
There's big ones, obviously, that even surprisingly to date people haven't seen, like Salem's Lot and The Changeling. Those are definitely some that I would throw out there as being seen. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake in the 70s, 78, I think.
Yes.
Love Invasion.
Yes. I was about to include that one. But I thought it was because it enjoys, I guess, a cult status, but not really, because a lot of people really seen it and like it, and it's often mentioned as something that's superior to the original in the same lines as The Thing, right? So I think I was like, okay, to stick to the idea or the concept to go over movies that are a bit overlooked. I skipped Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but that's interesting that you mention it, because do you think, now that we're both here talking about it, do you think that it's is it a movie that's actually overlooked, or do you think that actually no, it's well known?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's overlooked. I definitely think that if there's one that's going to be overlooked, it's going to be probably, I think it's in the 2000s, or could be the 90s, with Nicole Kidman. That's one that is a remake that's kind of overlooked.
The others?
No, it's
The Others?
called it's called.
Oh
Invasion.
no, sorry.
The
The 2006 one with
That's it.
Daniel Craig.
And
Yes.
I love that one. I
Yes,
think that
sorry,
one's
yeah.
overlooked. But my favorite, of course, is the 70s. I think a lot of people have seen it. Of course, you've always got a group that have never, really ventured out into this, and they're just kind of discovering it, which is what I love about when I'm making these posts, finding out that people have never seen a movie that I just assumed everybody had. And so I kind of stopped assuming that, and I love finding out when someone is discovering. I would love to go back and watch so many of these for the first time, like a lot of people that I'm coming across and meeting are doing. Obviously, it's a great feeling when someone takes your own recommendation and loves it, but I also love just even if they're just watching it for the first time. And yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely one that should be talked about. I mean, even if it's one that is talked about a lot, it's for a good reason that it is. I mean, it's another one that's based on another novel. There you got a situation where this story is so compelling that, gosh, there's been so many versions of it out there that there's at least 4 or 5 versions of this in movies over the years.
Yes, and I mean it's always a bit always relevant. I mean, I've never heard. Sorry, you are the first person I hear that's singing the praises of the 2006 version. I've never seen that one. I've seen. So you have the 1950s original, which was relevant because of the parallels between what was in the picture and McCarthy hearings. Then you have the 1978 one, obviously after Watergate. People really enjoyed for a while those political thrillers, and I think that there's it has features an amazing cast. Again, Jeff Goldblum, Donald Sutherland, underrated actor. and Leonard Nimoy. Yeah, that's right. And the '93 version, I still enjoyed it. I watched it. It's with by
Yeah, I
Abel
like
Ferrara,
93's
right?
version.
And I think
It's very good.
yes, it's very good, and I think it's kind of like the ennui of the '90s. It's very
It
much of a
is.
product of its time, and I think and that you have that chilling scene where Meg Tilly's character is like, "Listen, where do you go? Where are you gonna go?" But she's very calm when she asks that question, and she's already like she's one of the pot people. Sorry, spoiler alert. But she's like, you can't go anywhere. But she says that in a very calming voice, and it's eerie. So I really enjoyed that one, the '93 version. But you're the first person I meet, and I recall when the movie was released, a lot of people went to see it. A lot of my friends went to see it. I skipped on purpose, and nobody really enjoyed it, and I haven't seen it. So I mean, what's your take on that? The Nicole
Well, I mean, they're
Kidman
not really
version?
breaking any new ground with it. The story is the story.
Mhm.
It is not really. You change it, it's something completely different, which tends to be the problem with a lot of remakes as it is anyway. Is they want to change something. Sometimes it is for the better, but in general, I think that you've got two heavy hitters with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman, which sell it well. You've got others that you would recognize. Jeffrey Wright's in it. Veronica Cartwright, which she's in the '78 version. I love
Yeah.
Veronica Cartwright's
Yep.
character in this. I like it. It is again a product of its time for the 2000s type horror. While just like the '93 version is, I definitely recommend it. I don't really have a whole lot of. It is not the best, but it's certainly not. It's entertaining. Is a good way of putting it.
And do you think they'll make it?
And do you think they'll
Oh, I'm
make
sure they
another
will.
version?
I mean, it makes money, so even if it's a terrible movie, people are still going to
Yeah.
see it.
Just put the cancel culture.
Just put the cancel culture spin on it, and there you go. Green light at 25 million budget, and off we go. But I mean, back to the '78 one. I think it's from the three versions I've seen. It's the one that really stands out. Not only because of the whole technical execution, but I think I don't know. There's a whole vibe there that because the 1950s one, it's very good, but it's still very much. If you remove Kevin McCarthy and you put somebody else and you remove something or make some tweaks, you couldn't even tell it apart from some of the movies that were released in the 50s. But I think the 1978 version, right, there was nothing like that being made at the time, at least not that I know of. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's quite unique because it really stands out. And Philip Kaufman, he's definitely a great director, so
Yeah,
I really
think
enjoyed
it's,
it.
it's a perfect one for its time, where they had not done one in a couple decades. The '50s version, though, it may not be scary to someone looking back on it now, but that was a time when people lived in those kind of quiet little towns, and everybody was
Yeah.
normal, and everything was. There wasn't anything bad happening anywhere. That at least it was never portrayed. That it wasn't portrayed like Norman Rockwell. Then you throw something like this that could be absolutely terrorizing, and something that kind of feels like it could actually happen. And back in the '50s, and that I'm sure that threw people way off. And that's why I think the '78 version works so well too, is because it feels like we're just waiting for them to start planting the pods out back in our yard. It feels like any time now that kind of thing could still happen.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah. Oh no. I'm with you there. I think the point of comparison for me, at least with the 1950s version, it's there's that Twilight Zone episode, "The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street," and I think it's shares or there's a similar ground or some common aspects. I'm not gonna say they're like, oh, watch one and then watch the other. No, they're somewhat different, but I think that one, even in a shorter period of time, the execution it's better than Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 55 or 54 version. And I think this episode, and again, they're probably 5 years apart, but I think this episode for me, that's where I judge or compare the
It's a
original
good
Invasion,
comparison.
right?
I think the aliens are among us feeling that whole idea that sells well. That sells well in not just in movies and books, but it sells because it feels like, that's the kind of thing that, we're all worried that could happen one day. And in large part, we're worried about that because we've watched so many of these movies where that's what's happened. We've got it in our mind that that's going to happen one day. Just like all these pandemic movies that we've watched, these disaster movies we've seen over the years. That's because things happen, And
don't get me started on that. I recall like for the first time in 9 years last year, I recalled how depressed I felt when I came out of the screening room after watching Contagion. And I was like, wow, and I hope I never get to feel like this again.
Right.
And here we are. So it was kind of like, it's one of those movies. I get it. The other one from, it's not a horror movie, it's more of the whole disaster genre. It's Cassandra's Crossing.
I do.
I don't know if you've
I
seen
love
that
a
one.
train movie anyway. I'm a sucker for any kind of train movie, and Cassandra's Crossing is just really good.
Yeah, and again, it also starts with, I think that movie, it falls apart.
Does.
Yes, like so many disaster movies, it just falls apart. But I recall watching it when it was on TV, like late at night, and I was probably 11 or something. And the only thing I recall was the opening sequence, like that slow motion running. And this is 76, I think the original. And the slow motion running of the guy trying to escape the World Health Organization like headquarters with the disease in his body. And I was just like, honestly, when the pandemic hit last year, I wasn't masochist enough to go and rewatch Contagion like many people did, or even Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman. But I was very tempted. I ended up not doing it to revisit Cassandra's Crossing.
I mean, Cassandra's is one of those that a lot of people where a lot of people really don't know much about that movie. But I really do love it. I think that it tells a really good story. It does have its moments where it falls apart, where you just are, you're expecting one thing and this happens instead. But it's definitely one that I've always loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, now as we covered a lot of ground, talked about a lot of great movies. Let's end on a high note with recommendations. Not recommendations for you and I, but things that are on our list. Like I can share with you, I've been meaning to watch The Driller Killer for years, so that's definitely one of the 70s horror classics that's on my list. What about you? Do you have any pending ones that you want to watch?
I've always got some kind of watch list in place. Sometimes it's because I'm just wanting to watch something, and sometimes it's because it's a situation where I have I'm trying to do something for the website. I mean for the feed, and I'm wanting to do a series on something. A lot of the times I watch stuff, I end up not knowing what to watch. I'll go watch something I love. I think a lot of us do that. It's a comfort situation. It's hard to choose a new thing whenever you've got so many great ones that you just love, and it's easier to pick that. And so I do go that route. If you will.
So yeah, about your watch list.
There's some that, again, I love to revisit because I haven't seen them in a long time, or may have seen a part of it. A lot of those Giallo movies I've not actually come across and seen myself. Some of those that you hear about, I know they probably aren't the best of movies, but I definitely have a list of several. Corruption of Chris Miller's on my list. That's one I haven't seen. Short Night of Glass Dolls, I haven't seen that. That's on my list. Let's see. Grizzly actually is one that I've never actually seen myself. Is that one that I definitely need to bring to the top?
Yeah, I guess. I guess now I was expecting more of a splash with Grizzly 2 being released this year, right? Finally.
Yeah.
So,
and that's probably why it's on
my
my list. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I heard about it, and I heard long before. I guess a couple of years ago when there was still the sequel was still on hiatus. But George Clooney was like, "Oh, I hope nobody watches it," and I guess nobody did, and it wasn't the kind of like the splash. I was hoping for more of a splash and people to revisit the original, but I guess that wasn't it.
Yeah. It's one of those where you want to go back and you're hoping for greatness, but there's a reason why some of these aren't at the top of people's lists necessarily, but my brothers, I have two brothers, and uh, I really don't they don't care so much about horror, but my brother said one of the movies that scared him as a kid was Grizzly, and
Uh,
I've never seen it, but if you're not into horror, a movie like that and you're a kid, that's the kind of thing where I'm sure it very well could,
yeah. Yeah,
very well could.
absolutely. And when we talk about creatures in the 70s, there's one that I actually had to look at it because we talked about or I talked about the town that dreaded sundown, Charles B. Pierce.
Yeah,
And I thought about that movie he directed before, The Legend of Boogie Creek,
yeah,
something like that.
Boggy Creek.
Eh, Boggy Creek, have you seen that one?
I've seen that one. I hadn't ever seen it until Joe Bob Briggs came back. And that very first marathon he did of things, Boggy Creek was one of his late night movies he chose. And I do try to find the positive in most movies, but I just couldn't get into that one. I never have loved it. But it's one that a lot of people, it's got a following that a lot of people just really love that. It was just I was just kept waiting for the Boggy Creek Monster to jump in and most of the time, and it's one that I have seen, and that was when I watched it, was when Joe Bob featured it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been on my list for years, but again, I'm a fan of the town that dreaded sundown, but I still have to. Oh, and there's a sequel to Boggy
Yeah,
Creek.
yeah, I've
How
heard
is
that.
that?
It's kind of become a thing. I think since Joe Bob featured it, it's kind of become
Yeah,
more and more people are talking about it. That's generally how it goes with something like that,
yeah.
where it's brought up. But yeah, it's one that I've never seen the sequel.
Okay, okay. No, definitely, I'll need to watch that one, and it's one that, as you were talking about Grizzly and some of your recommendations, it's on my list now. Good stuff. Well, thank you, Derek, for agreeing to be a guest. Definitely a lot for me to watch, and I made some notes here. Hopefully, we can record a sequel to this episode, one that people will listen to as well, covering our next steps or even forgotten gems or overlooked movies of the 80s or 90s. That would be super awesome.
I would love to do that. I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun to do this, and I look forward to see what you come up with by putting all this together.
Hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to be notified of the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded, don't forget to follow Vinyl and Celluloid on your favorite platform.